You know, I just set up a new website. michaelcoren.com is the website, and I was putting all the links to my favorite people. And Robert Spencer, Jihad Watch, was one of the first I put up there, because if you really want to be informed about what is going on in the world, and Islam is a major issue, whether you like it or not, then you do have to go to Jihad Watch and Robert Spencer's site. He's a terrific guy, a wonderful guest. Now, we were going to have him in studio, but because of various issues, I can't go into detail here, but obviously this involves security and so on. We're going to do this by Skype instead for everybody's safety. So welcome to you, Robert.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be back, as always.
Thank you. I wish we could start with a different subject, but Easter, as with any Christian festival, is time for Islamic gangs to attack, and this happened in, was it Nigeria?
Yes, indeed, yes. Scores dead. Church bombing, and this was something that Boko Haram, Western Education is Sin, is the name of the jihad group, they had warned about. And, of course, this is the kind of act of piety that they consider pleases their God, to murder believers in other religions.
How many people have been killed in this? We're hearing of a large number.
Yes, I believe that it was at least 50 at last count.
50 people. And viewers, I mean, I'm sure they do realize this, but if 50 people are dead, that means at least as many others wounded, and even beyond the physical wounds, the trauma and the shock and the loss of life of relatives and loved ones. So this involves hundreds and hundreds of people. But this is not unique. There were many such attacks last year, and tragically there will be many more such attacks this year.
Yes, absolutely, Michael. And the point of them is, the reason why they do this is very simple, that they want Christians to be afraid to go to the church. And they want them to stop praying and worshiping as Christians. Then they will, this is all part of their larger program to Islamize the society in which these bombings take place.
Mm-hmm. Now, if this would have provoked and produced numerous mass marches of Muslims throughout the Islamic heartland and the Islamic diaspora protesting barbarism committed and now named, that would be quite something. I haven't noticed any condemnations and certainly no demonstrations. No,
this is yet another manifestation of the utter hollowness of the mainstream narrative regarding Islam, Michael. Look, we've been told since 9/11 that Islam is a religion of peace that was hijacked by a tiny minority of extremists who twist and misuse its peaceful teachings. And yet, if that were true, then what you described would have happened. We would have seen large groups of Muslims protesting against Islamic terrorism. We would see organizations of Muslims with massive membership lists fighting against jihad terrorism and Islamic supremacism within the Muslim community. We see none of that. We find instead that we have pro forma condemnations of terrorism from Muslim groups, and when you start pressing them on it, they will not condemn Hamas, they will not condemn Hezbollah. They start talking about state terrorism, by which they mean the actions of America and Israel.
Yeah. Now, to put this in context, a man called Baruch Goldstein some years ago, crazy, awful person committing a crazy, awful act. He murdered Islamic worshippers in the West Bank, and he killed about, well, actually probably less, around the same number of people who died in this attack. After this, almost 1 million Israelis marched to condemn what he had done. At that time, that was almost a quarter of the entire population, and of the adult population, probably a third of Israel, protesting. And that was one attack. There have been dozens and dozens of such attacks committed on Christians, Jews, all sorts of people in the name of Islam, and barely any demonstrations at all in response.
Right. I mean, you know, an intriguing contrast, really, Michael, is the demonstration that the Muslim group American Islamic Forum for Democracy, headed by the famous Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is the moderate Muslim. He's really the only moderate Muslim spokesman of any prominence, and even he was only able to get 36 Muslims at this demonstration in favor of NYPD counter-terror practices a few weeks ago in New York City. And yet that got international publicity because, of course, the Western media is anxious to pump up its false narrative about the vast majority of Muslims condemning this. But all they could muster was 36 Muslims. Right. And you're absolutely right. You put that up against the reaction in Israel to Baruch Goldstein, or the reaction that really any Western entity or Jews or Christians have ever had to any actual atrocity or any injustice committed by the United States, by any NATO entity or anything of the kind. You know, look at the massive apologies and bending over backwards about the Quran burnings in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Last minute, we have a series of arrests in the United Kingdom, and not directly political, but Islamic rape gangs, that they were grooming young women to be prostitutes and so on. We've now had another one in France and elsewhere. I could say it's not exclusively Islamic, but actually they pretty much are exclusively Islamic. The men involved are Muslim. Why is this happening?
Well, you know, Michael, this is really a very dirty little secret, but last summer, the mask slipped a couple times. It was very interesting. The Quran in chapter 4, verse 3 says a man can marry up to 4 women, as well as to hold the captives his right hand possesses. And that is essentially a slave girl who can be a sex slave. Now, this is right in the Quran, the Muslim holy book. Last summer, there was a Kuwaiti feminist, as a matter of fact, or at least feminist in the Muslim context, spokesperson who said that this practice ought to be revived. We ought to go into Chechnya and kidnap non-Muslim women and press them into service as sex slaves. Whoa. This is something, because it's rooted in the Islamic holy texts, unfortunately, there are Muslims who believe this way, and they're behaving this way with these
Forgive me, I'm going to have to stop you there. I wish you had more time. We'll have you back very soon. We need to dwell on that particular subject as well. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.